Assalamualaikum dan salam sejahtera. Anda sedang menyaksikan Niaga AWANI bersama saya Nina Rozman, dan tumpuan pada kali ini bukan hari ini saja tapi sepanjang minggu ini kita lihat tertumpu kepada lawatan oleh Presiden China iaitu Xi Jinping ke Malaysia, dan kita lihat hari ini adalah hari terakhir, dan di segmen ataupun Niaga AWANI akan bawakan segala perbincangan dan rangkuman mengenai lawatan ini, dan kita akan mulakan dengan laporan ini terlebih dahulu di mana Perdana Menteri Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim dan Presiden China Xi Jinping pada Rabu menyaksikan pertukaran 31 memorandum persefahaman MOU dan dokumen yang merangkumi pelbagai sektor kerjasama antara kedua-dua negara. Majlis itu diadakan di Kompleks Seri Perdana sempena lawatan negara 3 hari Xi ke Malaysia bermula Selasa. Antara yang menjadi tumpuan ialah MOU antara Kerajaan Malaysia dan agensi berita Xinhua dari China dalam bidang berita dan maklumat.
Menteri Komunikasi Datuk Fahmi Fadzil dan Duta Besar China ke Malaysia Ouyang Yujing masing-masing mewakili Malaysia dan China dalam pertukaran dokumen itu. Menerusi MOU ini, penyiar rasmi negara RTM dan Xinhua akan bekerjasama dalam aktiviti media bersama, terutamanya pertukaran berita serta penerbitan bersama program dan dokumentari bagi mengetengahkan keunikan negara masing-masing dan memperkukuh persefahaman bersama. Sementara itu, Menteri Luar Datuk Seri Mohamad Hassan dan rakan sejawatnya dari China Wang Yi bertukar MOU antara Kerajaan Malaysia dan China bagi mempromosi kerjasama di bawah inisiatif keselamatan global. Satu perjanjian pengecualian visa secara timbal balik bagi pemegang pasport urusan rasmi dan pasport biasa turut dipersetujui antara kedua-dua kerajaan, dengan Malaysia diwakili oleh Menteri Dalam Negeri Datuk Seri Saifuddin Nasution Ismail dan China diwakili oleh Wang. Menteri Pelaburan Perdagangan dan Industri Tengku Datuk Seri Zafrul Tengku Abdul Aziz dan Menteri Perdagangan China Wang Wentao pula bertukar 3 MOU yang merangkumi kerjasama dalam perkhidmatan perdagangan. Menteri Pengangkutan Anthony Loke Siu Fook dan Ouyang bertukar MOU antara kementeriannya dan Pentadbiran Kereta Api Nasional China bagi memperkukuh kerjasama dalam sektor kereta api. MOU mengenai sokongan bersama pembinaan makmal bersama dalam teknologi baru muncul telah berlangsung antara Menteri Sains Teknologi dan Inovasi Chang Lee Kang dan Ouyang. Dalam bidang pengajian tinggi, Menteri Pengajian Tinggi Datuk Seri Zamri Abdul Kadir dan Ouyang bertukar MOU antara Universiti Malaya dan Universiti Peking mengenai pembinaan makmal gabungan baharu AI Plus China-Malaysia. Selain MOU, Malaysia dan China bertukar 2 nota, 2 perjanjian dan protokol untuk memajukan kerjasama dalam bidang kepentingan bersama.
Malaysia dan China menandatangani 31 memorandum persefahaman melibatkan pelbagai bidang kerjasama, khususnya kecerdasan buatan AI, ekonomi digital, pelancongan dan pelbagai lagi. Untuk sebuah negara yang amat terbuka kepada aplikasi dalam urusan seharian, kerjasama dengan China ini mainkan peranan yang cukup signifikan untuk mewujudkan perpindahan teknologi, dan kita akan bawakan pakar untuk bantu kita fahami bagaimanakah setiap MOU terutama yang berteraskan AI ini dapat membentuk masa depan digital dan AI negara untuk kedua-dua negara. Kita mempersilakan Profesor Dr. Zurati Ahmad Zukaina, merupakan Profesor Rangkaian Komputer dan Keselamatan Cyber Fakulti Sains Komputer dan Teknologi Maklumat UPM. Saya nak ucapkan terima kasih Prof kerana sudi meluangkan masa bersama kami. Pertama sekali kita lihat ini adalah kerjasama yang diperkukuhkan, dan kali ini banyak memorandum yang berteraskan digital AI. Jadi bagaimana kerjasama dalam AI antara Malaysia dan China akan tingkatkan lagi kedudukan Malaysia sebagai hub digital di Asia Tenggara, mengambil kira juga tahun ini kita adalah pengerusi untuk ASEAN, dan apa antara manfaat khusus yang boleh dijangka daripada setiap perkongsian ini?
Okay, Assalamualaikum, selamat pagi. Terima kasih Nina. Okey, kalau kita lihat dari sudut kerjasama AI Malaysia-China, dari sudut manfaatnya yang Malaysia sebagai hub digital ASEAN. Yang pertama, kita dapat lihat dari segi infrastruktur teknologi. Macam mana pelaburan daripada China, especially yang melibatkan data center, infrastruktur 5G, di mana kita tahu sekarang ini di China sendiri sudah ada 6G, dan juga platform AI yang lain, contohnya dengan kerjasama Huawei dapat memperkukuhkan asas teknologi, infrastruktur teknologi di Malaysia. Yang kedua, saya nampak dari sudut pemindahan ilmu. Bila pemindahan ilmu, ia melibatkan program latihan bersama bagi meningkatkan kemahiran tenaga, seperti especially yang melibatkan pekerja tempatan dari segi amalan dan juga knowledge AI-nya dan juga data analitik. Ini sangat penting. Yang ketiga pula adalah inovasi R&D. Macam mana makmal di industri, di universiti dan juga pusat pendidikan di Malaysia mampu menghasilkan penyelesaian AI secara kolaboratif, yang especially melibatkan penggunaan AI dalam negara dan juga secara keseluruhan di negara ASEAN. Dan yang saya nampak yang keempat adalah Malaysia ni sebagai pintu gerbang ASEAN, pintu gerbang ASEAN di mana Malaysia ni boleh jadi tapak ujian produk AI China yang sepatutnya disesuaikan dengan pasaran dalam negara, keperluan dalam negara, dalam masa yang sama pasaran serantau yang mampu menarik pelaburan global. Ya, of course yang sangat penting adalah dari segi takbir urus AI. Macam mana kolaborasi ini mampu membentuk satu dasar etika, especially yang melibatkan keselamatan AI, ya, dalam meningkatkan daya tahannya, daya tahan digital, ya, dan juga terhadap ancaman cyber untuk meningkatkan reputasi sebagai hub inovasi yang beretika dan bertanggungjawab.
Dan Prof, apa antara mekanisme yang ada untuk pastikan pemindahan ataupun transfer of teknologi yang berkesan dari syarikat AI China kepada rakan sejawat Malaysia, dan bagaimana ini akan pengaruhi inovasi tempatan dan kita lihat pembangunan bakat daripada upskilling, reskilling, dan ketika ini kita ada panggilkan cross-skilling?
Alright. Itulah bila melibatkan kepada mekanisme ini, ia sepatutnya boleh dirancang dan dipersetujui, ya, secara mutual, bukan hanya satu pihak saja. Yang saya nampak yang pertama adalah usaha sama dan juga pusat serantau di antara Malaysia, ya, syarikat industri di Malaysia, local players, research institution, ya, di Malaysia dengan pihak strategik pihak di China, contohnya Alibaba, ya, dan juga MDEC di Malaysia, ya. Begitu juga dengan pusat R&D, kalau China memang kita dah ada Huawei, dan memang Huawei juga mempunyai collaboration yang sangat very komprehensif dengan pusat penyelidikan di Malaysia, ya, yang mempunyai akses terhadap teknologi dan juga latihan. Yang kedua ada sudut latihan dan juga pendidikan. Macam mana, ya, bila kita lihat kepada latihan, ia memerlukan kepada mekanisme melibatkan pemindahan program latihan teknikal, ya, dalam masa yang sama kerjasama yang sangat bersepadu di antara universiti di Malaysia dan juga di China dalam meningkatkan kemahiran tenaga kerja. Sebab dia tak boleh berlaku satu pihak saja, dia mesti berlaku secara kolaboratif. Of course, bila kita lihat, ya, penyelidikan ini memerlukan makmal, ya, inovasi yang fokus kepada aplikasi tempatan. Macam mana keperluan kita di negara kita, ya, dari sudut pertanian tropika, ya, bila kita melihat kepada produk di China, macam mana boleh adopt, ya, dengan keperluan di dalam negara. Dalam masa yang sama, perlu ada satu mutual understanding, perjanjian IP, ya, berdasarkan kepada klausul tertentu ataupun co-creation, ya, untuk memastikan perkongsian hak cipta tu yang seimbang, ya. Dalam masa yang sama kita lihat ia mampu harus mekanisme untuk membentuk menghasilkan, ya, inkubasi startup. Startup ini sangat penting, ya, merupakan pemacu bagi menghasilkan lagi industri-industri players dalam negara yang boleh dibentuk bersama dengan rakan-rakan, contohnya Alibaba Cloud, ya, daripada berdasarkan teknologi daripada China.
Baik, selain daripada meliti kepada mekanisme, kita nak lihat bagaimanakah perjanjian kerjasama AI ini dapat menyumbang kepada pertumbuhan ekonomi negara. Tadi pertama sekali kita doktor ataupun prof ada kongsikan bagaimana ia dapat meningkatkan lagi kedudukan Malaysia sebagai hub digital di Asia Tenggara, dan antara mekanisme yang boleh dilakukan untuk pastikan transition teknologi yang lebih lancar, dan yang boleh kita katakan lebih selamat. Tapi kita lihat bagaimana ia menyumbang kepada sektor-sektor tertentu ini seperti sektor e-dagang, logistik dan juga perkhidmatan kerajaan dalam government punya administration.
Okey. Nina, kalau kita lihat kepada pertumbuhan ekonomi berdasarkan kepada e-commerce, ya, e-dagang. Jadi sekarang ini masyarakat, ya, sama ada di Malaysia, di China dan global, ya, kita melihat kepada pertumbuhan, peningkatan kepada penggunaan, ya, penyebaran, ya, produk berdasarkan AI melalui e-commerce, e-dagang. Jadi seharusnya di situ pengurusan inventory automatik, ya, dan juga yang sangat penting adalah untuk memastikan, ya, tidak berlaku penipuan dalam transaksi. Dalam aspek untuk mencegah penipuan transaksi, ya, itu adalah, ya, dari sudut sektor e-commerce, ya, yang boleh memberikan pendapatan yang lumayan, ya, dalam di kalangan peniaga, ya, especially melibatkan peniaga tempatan. Seterusnya, ya, dapat meningkatkan inovasi, ya, pengguna. Jadi dari sudut ekonomi ini akan meningkatkan jualan, ya, menambahkan daya saing kompetitif yang sangat sihat, ya, Jadi dari sudut peningkatan kerajaan, ya, ianya lebih kepada penggunaan teknologi yang bersifat AI. Contohnya kalau kita memerlukan info, ya, pelbagai bentuk info, kita sekarang ini pergilah mana-mana website, kita akan nampak kita boleh berinteraksi dengan chatbot, ya, yang dikenali sebagai chatbot AI. So dalam masa yang sama, contohnya mungkin ada chatbot MyGov. Saya rasa memang telah pun ada di kalangan, di kebanyakan sektor dan juga ministry yang boleh adopt, ya, chatbot AI, ya. Jadi ini akan membantu dari sudut betul keperluan sistem keselamatan awam, ya, berdasarkan kepada penggunaan teknologi AI. Jadi saya melihat ini akan mengurangkan kos operasi, ya, akan meningkatkan keyakinan, ya, pengguna dan juga pelabur, ya. Jadi dalam masa yang sama kita nak memastikan, ya, negara ini akan terus dapat dikembangkan, ya, dari sudut penggunaannya dan juga dari segi peningkatan terhadap peluang-peluang pekerjaan, ya. Contohnya bila adanya dagang, perkhidmatan kerajaan dan sebagainya dalam bentuk teknologi AI, ia akan membuka ruang kepada peluang pekerjaan. Jadi contohnya data, sains data, ya, dan dari segi logistik, dari segi software engineer dan sebagainya.
Dan seperti yang Prof kongsikan, manfaatnya sudah tentu banyak seperti kita dapat saksikan, dapat meningkatkan lagi keyakinan pelabur termasuk mewujudkan lebih banyak peluang pekerjaan untuk pekerja-pekerja tempatan, dan kita dengar kerjasama yang diperkukuhkan melalui perjanjian AI ini sudah tentu it's good news for both of the countries, Prof. Tetapi bukan mudah kerana kita lihat negara Malaysia dan China mempunyai keupayaannya masing-masing dan peraturan dan undang-undangnya yang tersendiri. Jadi mungkin boleh kongsikan kepada kami apakah antara cabaran yang mungkin timbul daripada pelaksanaan teknologi AI di Malaysia dan bagaimana ini boleh diatasi untuk memastikan integrasi yang lebih lancar dan pemantauan kepada undang-undang tempatan.
Ya, Nina, bila kita lihat kepada peraturan, ya, di Malaysia, of course kita ada privacy data. Bila privacy data yang sangat-sangat straightforward adalah PDPA. Jadi sejauh mana PDPA ini boleh cover untuk data AI, ya, yang bersifatnya data biometrik, ya, contohnya pengenalan wajah dan sebagainya. Ada tak telah pun dirangkumi melalui PDPA tersebut. Jadi mungkin di sini kena tambah baik supaya lebih komprehensif, ya, dalam merangkumi, ya, data AI, ya. Yang kedua dari sudut transparent ataupun ketelusan algoritma. Setiap teknologi yang dihasilkan itu adalah berdasarkan kepada struktur algoritma, ya, arahan algoritma. Jadi bila ada audit yang khusus, ya, terhadap penggunaan algoritma itu, ia akan mencegah dari segi bias kepada mana, ia lebih bersifat transparent. Untuk apa, ya, untuk apa dari segi keperluannya, dan natijahnya adalah untuk kebaikan, ya, bukan untuk mengambil ruang di situ. Sebab kita tahu teknologi AI ini ada untuk kebaikan dan dalam masa yang sama boleh juga untuk kekurangan, ya, untuk keburukan. Jadi melalui ketelusan algoritma itu daripada audit, ya, melalui sistem audit, ya, badan-badan tertentu yang dilantik boleh mengaudit algoritma yang dihasilkan dalam teknologi AI, ya. And then yang ketiga adalah undang-undang sedia ada sama ada sesuai ataupun tidak, ya, dalam sistem, melibatkan sistem, ya. Dan yang keempat dari sudut kemahiran pakar AI ini haruslah dilihat dari segi kepentingannya untuk apa dan sebagainya, lebih-lebih lagi dalam melibatkan teknologi AI yang bersifatnya sangat kompleks. Macam mana ada kepakaran kita di Malaysia ini ready tak untuk audit, ya, sistem-sistem AI yang lebih kompleks.
Baik, itulah persoalannya bergerak ke hadapan adalah kita bersedia atau tidak untuk maju ke depan bersama AI dan bersama rakan kita lihat rakan perdagangan utama Malaysia iaitu China. Sekali lagi saya nak ucapkan terima kasih kepada Profesor Dr. Zuraiti Ahmad Zulkarnain, merupakan Profesor Rangkaian Komputer dan Keselamatan Cyber Fakulti Sains Komputer dan Teknologi Maklumat UPM. So, tentu banyak lagi perbincangan yang akan kami bawakan mengenai perkara ini dan saya akan teruskan dengan perkembangan seterusnya. Malaysia mengekalkan hubungan perdagangan dan pelaburan yang kukuh kukuh dengan Amerika Syarikat. Namun dalam masa yang sama memegang prinsip perdagangan bebas tanpa menjejaskan mana-mana pihak. Perdana Menteri Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim berkata, sebagai sebuah negara yang bebas dan berdaulat, Malaysia tegas dan terbuka dalam menyatakan pendirian apatah lagi dalam isu hubungan dengan China, di mana manfaatnya akan dinikmati segenap lapisan masyarakat di negara ini.
Kita dengan negara China itu bila untuk kepentingan rakyat, untuk kepentingan ekonomi negara dan kepentingan pembangunan dan keutuhan negara seluruhnya. Kita bukan saja tidak harus ditekan oleh mana-mana pihak. Kita tidak menerima tekanan itu setakat ini. Jadi kita ambil sikap siapa yang baik dan sambutan negara China ini harus saya tegaskan. Ya. Dia negara besar, ekonominya kuat. Ketenteraannya itu sangat kuat. Tetapi kita tidak pernah merasakan satu permasalahan atau tekanan dan hubungan kita itu dianggap sebagai satu negara yang setara dengan mereka. Perbincangan, penghormatan diberikan, itu bagi saya sangat bermakna. Dan kita bincang dalam semua perkara. Tentunya dalam hubungan dua negara sahabat, ada perkara yang kita persetujui, ada perkara yang kita agak kurang senang, tapi kita bincang secara sahabat.
Beliau berkata demikian ketika muncul dalam program khas agenda AWANI Asia Eksklusif, kolaborasi bersama kumpulan media China CMG pada Rabu. Ia sempena lawatan 2 hari Presiden China Xi Jinping ke Malaysia bermula Selasa.
Sementara itu, Perdana Menteri memaklumkan Malaysia berminat untuk menjadi tuan rumah sidang kemuncak ASEAN Majlis Kerjasama Teluk GCC China kerana melihat ia satu usaha bagi mengeratkan persahabatan, perdagangan, pelaburan dan perkongsian teknologi dengan China.
Saya fikir kerana semua negara ini juga mahu ada hubungan yang lebih akrab dan perdagangan, pelaburan, teknologi AI dengan negara China, maka kita pun akan katakan manfaatkan pertemuan ASEAN, kemudian keesokannya itu dengan GCC, kemudian dengan negara China. Tujuannya tujuan ekonomi, perdagangan dan persahabatan.
Baik, kita akan beralih kepada perkembangan ringgit setakat pagi ini di mana ringgit ditutup tinggi berbanding dolar Amerika Syarikat pada Rabu dan ini adalah prestasi ringgit pada akhir penutup semalam Rabu yang disokong oleh kelemahan mata wang Amerika Syarikat dalam persekitaran ketidaktentuan disebabkan perang perdagangan dan ketegangan akibat tarif Amerika Syarikat, kata seorang penganalisis. Dan kalau kita lihat pada 6 petang ringgit telah meningkat kepada 4.4085 atau 4.36 berbanding dolar Amerika Syarikat iaitu pada 4.4100 atau 4.155 ketika ditutup pada Selasa. Dan kita akan saksikan bagaimanakah prestasi pembukaan semula bursa Malaysia setakat Khamis ini. Dan kalau kita lihat lebih kurang tarikh Khamis ini adalah 17 April 2025 dan pada waktu pembukaan, ringgit Malaysia berbanding dolar Amerika Syarikat berada pada 4.411 dan ini adalah prestasi terkini yang dapat kita saksikan secara tepat pada jam 9.20 pagi. Dan kalau kita nak meneliti bagaimanakah prestasi ataupun trend pergerakan nilai ringgit Malaysia dalam tempoh seminggu, tempoh terdekat, sehinggalah kita mendapat ataupun mencapai prestasi terkini ringgit Malaysia berbanding dolar Amerika, kita dapat saksikan ini adalah prestasinya. Apabila graf ini menunjukkan penurunan, ia mencerminkan ataupun menyifatkan nilai ringgit Malaysia semakin kukuh berbanding dolar Amerika Syarikat. Dan dalam tempoh 7 hari ini kita dapat saksikan antara yang paling lemah telah dicatatkan ringgit Malaysia berbanding dolar Amerika ataupun USD berada pada 4.4807. Ini adalah antara prestasi yang paling lemah ataupun range pergerakan ringgit dalam tempoh 7 hari ataupun seminggu. Dan antara yang paling tertinggi nilai ini yang telah dicatatkan adalah 4.399 ringgit Malaysia berbanding dolar Amerika Syarikat dan ini adalah tempoh prestasi dalam tempoh terdekat yang dapat kita saksikan. Baik, saya akan beralih kepada FBM KSI ataupun pasaran tempatan kalau boleh kita saksikan di sini. Sebelum saya kongsikan bagaimanakah angkanya pada pagi ini, saya akan lihat dulu ataupun bawa ke anda perkembangan semalam di mana bursa Malaysia ditutup rendah pada Rabu terjejas oleh aktiviti pengambilan untung yang berterusan di tengah-tengah kebimbangan terhadap tarif perdagangan global, dan pada 5 petang FTSE Bursa Malaysia KLCI susut 9.51 mata mewakili 0.64% kepada 1476.92 berbanding paras penutup 1486.43 pada Selasa. Baik, sekarang kita akan melihat bagaimanakah pembukaan semula pula untuk Bursa Malaysia setakat pagi ini. Ia berada pada 1473.44 dan ini adalah prestasi pembukaan yang dapat kita catat dan dapat kita saksikan setakat pagi 17 April 2025 pada hari Khamis. Ia adalah mengalami penurunan sebanyak 3.24 atau negatif 0.22%. Dan ini adalah prestasi pembukaan FTSE Bursa Malaysia yang mengalami penurunan setakat pagi jam, kalau kita lihat lebih tepat, 9.07 pagi melalui website marketwatch.com, dan dalam tempoh 5 hari kita nak lihat prestasi Bursa Malaysia ataupun trennya mengalami peningkatan yang agak stabil, di mana kalau kita lihat Jumaat lepas ia berada dalam keadaan yang agak rendah dengan nilai ataupun paras 1441.94, namun kita dapat saksikan peningkatan yang perlahan-lahan sehinggalah ia mencapai antara paras yang tertinggi dalam tempoh seminggu, iaitu pada 1488.89, dan ini juga merupakan antara range ataupun pergerakan FTSE Bursa Malaysia KLCI dalam tempoh 5 hari. Dan izinkan saya berbahasa Inggeris untuk berkongsi kepada anda bagaimanakah prestasi iaitu pasaran Asia, where we will take a look at the Asia Dow, where this is launched by the index provider Dow Jones Indexes. And for us to take a look for this morning as of 17 April 2025, we're going to take a look at the Asia Dow Index to see where it will show or measure ASEAN equity markets through the tracking of 30 leading blue chip. And as of this morning, we can say the Asia Dow Index USD is up by 3,930.33, which has increased by 4.93 or 0.13%. And the movement or trend for the Asia Dow Index, we can see is facing or having the trends of increase, where the range of the movement of Asia Dow Index within this 5 days, we can see the performance as of close as of this now. With the 5 days, we can see the lowest range was recorded at 3,787.14, and the highest range was recorded for the ASEAN market is 3,980.43, and this is the performance of Asia Dow Index as of this morning for 17 April 2025. And we're going to take a look at some of the main index under the Asia market data, where this is one of the main index. We can see a lot of the main index is facing green colors, which mean an increase within the markets. The positive increase is by Nikkei 225 index. One of the main index under the Asia Dow is increased by 0.53%. We can see all of this. Shanghai Composite Index also increased by 0.26%, and also to include the FTSE Straits Times Index is also having a decrease by 0.15%, including Hang Seng Index, which decreased by this morning with 1.91%. We can see all the main index under the Asia Dow is increasing, but all of them is under 1%. All right, this is the update we can see as of for Asia Dow Index, and also one of the main index performance as of this morning, 70 April. And I'm going to move on to the US market performance, where the US stocks ended sharply lower on Wednesday as Nvidia warned about steep charges from new US curbs on its cheap exports to China, and as Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell said, US economic growth appears to be slowing.
Powell, in remarks for the Economic Club in Chicago, said larger than expected tariffs likely mean higher inflation and slower growth, but he noted that the US economy is still in a solid position and that the Fed is waiting for greater clarity before considering policy changes. Stocks added the declines from earlier the day after Powell's comment and Nvidia and other chip maker. The S&P 500 lost 120.93 points or 2.24% to end at 5,275.07 points, while the Nasdaq Composite lost 516.008 points or 3.07% to 16,307.16. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell 699.57 points or 1.73% to 39,669.39. The US and China have been going back and forth in the tariff battle in recent weeks.
All right, let's break down what's happening in the US stock market. As you can see from the finviz.com, this is the Standard & Poor's 500 index stocks categorized by sector in industry, and every size represents the market cap. And I'm going to start with NVIDIA, but first of all, if you can see with what is going on, it's breaking down, it's happening, all is facing or heading with red performance as of this morning within the US market, we can see. And I'm going to start with NVIDIA first. With NVIDIA as of this morning has decreased or going down to 6.87%. And the latest update about NVIDIA on Tuesday said it would take $5.5 billion in charges after the US government limited export of its H20 artificial intelligence chip to China, a key market for one of its most popular chips. NVIDIA's AI chips have been a key focus of US exports control, as US officials have moved to keep the most advanced chips from being sold to China as the US tries to keep ahead in the AI race. After those controls were implemented, NVIDIA began designing chips that would come as close as possible to US limits. NVIDIA shares were down about 6% in after-hours trading. A US Commerce Department spokesperson said late on Tuesday that it was issuing new licensing requirements for exports of chips, including NVIDIA's H20, AMD's MI308, and their equivalents. Following next update, Apple is also facing a red color with down by 3.98% as of this morning. And the latest updates about Apple top global smartphone sales in Q1, driven by strong iPhone 16e demand in markets like Japan and India, despite weaker sales in the US, Europe and China, according to Counterpoint Research. Apple had 90% market share, just ahead of Samsung, 18%. iPhone demand remained strong in emerging markets. True competition from Huawei and lack of AI features hurt sales in China. We can say that International Data Corporation IDC reported global smartphone shipments rose 1.5%, with Apple front-loading supply to avoid potential US tariffs. Apple shares rose 3.5%. And for the update of Google, also facing decrease with 2.00%, and Alphabet's Google is being sued in Britain for potential damages of up to £5 billion or $6.6 billion in a class action alleging the company abused its dominant market position in the online search industry. The class action filed at the Competition Appeal Tribunal on Tuesday argues that Google's action enabled it to charge higher prices for the advertisement that appear in search inquiries than it otherwise could in a competitive market. It said the US tech giant contracted filmmakers to pre-install Google Search and the Chrome browser on Android devices and paid Apple to make it the default search engine on iPhones with the intention of shutting out competition. The claim filed by competition law expert Brook on behalf of thousands of businesses alleges Google ensured its search engine had better functionality and more features for Google's own advertising offers than of its competitor. And for the next update also, Meta is also down by 3.68%, almost achieving by 4%. And Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg consider spinning off Instagram in 2018 due to rising antitrust concern, according to a document revealed during his testimony at a US Federal Trade Commission trial. The trial seeks to unwind Meta's acquisitions of Instagram and WhatsApp. In an internal memo, Zuckerberg floated the idea while discussing app integration plans. He noted that while consolidation could boost growth, it might also weaken Facebook's core value. Ultimately, Meta chose to proceed with app integration in 2019. The memo highlights how seriously Zuckerberg viewed potential regulatory action at that time. That is the update for the US market and ASEAN market. We're going to move on to the next update with China has ordered its airlines not to take any further deliveries of Boeing jets in response to the US decision to impose 145% tariffs on Chinese goods. Bloomberg News reported on Tuesday, citing people familiar with the matter. Shares of Boeing, which looks at China as one of its biggest growth markets and where rival Airbus holds a dominant position, were down 2% in early trading. China's top three airlines, Air China, China Eastern Airlines and China Southern Airlines, had planned to take delivery of Boeing planes respectively between 2025 and 2027. Beijing also asked that Chinese carriers halt purchases of aircraft-related equipment and parts from US companies, the Bloomberg report said. China's move to halt purchases of aircraft-related components is expected to raise maintenance costs for the jets flying in the country. Beijing's action also follows its decision last week to hike levies on US imports to 125% in retaliation against US tariffs, which would significantly raise the cost of Boeing jets bound for Chinese carriers. US Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell said Wednesday that the Fed would wait for more data on the economy's direction before changing interest rates and characterized recent market volatility as a logical processing of the Trump administration's dramatic shifts in tariff policy. The outlook has now become extremely uncertain, Powell said, which changes in policy that don't provide businesses and economies with any clear parallels to study.
The administration is, as I mentioned in my remarks, is implementing significant policy changes, and particularly trade now is the focus. And the effects of that are likely to move us away from our goals. So unemployment is likely to go up as the economy slows in all likelihood, and inflation is likely to go up as tariffs find their way, and some part of those tariffs come to be paid by the public. So that's the strong likelihood, and my hope is that we'll get through this and get back. Well, we're always going to be aiming for maximum employment and price stability. That's what we do. I do think we'll be moving away from those goals probably for the balance of this year, and then, or at least not making any progress, and then we'll resume that progress as we can. When you think about supply disruptions, that is the kind of thing that can take time to resolve, and it can lead what would have been a one-time inflation shock to be extended, perhaps more persistent, and we would worry about that. In this case, you can look at the car companies, which their supply chains are likely, seem to be on track to be disrupted significantly, and you would worry that that process will take some years and that the inflationary process might be extended. So these are all of this is highly uncertain. We're thinking now really before the tariffs have their effects, as how they might affect the economy, and that's why we're waiting really to see what the policies ultimately are, and then we can make a better assessment of what the economic effects will be.
In the first public remarks on recent financial volatility, however, Powell said he felt markets were functioning well, with the swings in security values showing investors taking stock of the new landscape. On the legal case currently before the Supreme Court over President Donald Trump's firing of two Democrats from Federal Labor boards, Powell said he does not see it likely applying to Federal Reserve. Powell's remarks come a day after lawyers from the two individuals told the Supreme Court in filing connected to the case that allowing the dismissal of Stan leaves the independence of the Fed vulnerable.
All right, please stay tuned with us as we will bring more economy and business update right after this break.
Puan Dana, can you explain to me what just happened? Is he gone? Ini memang nak kena betul lah.
Senoi, you habis kalah lagi. 70,000 ringgit now.
Why are men like this? This time, I had a trick.
Deal.
Orang yang paling bahaya adalah orang yang paling dekat dengan kita. Any last words?
Betul. Okay, saya yakin Diana tu suspek, Chief.
Kita campak dia dulu. Kalau dia okey, baru kita terjun. What? Dah takkan ada siapa-siapa lagi yang boleh kontrol kita. Kita jahanamkan diorang semua.
You know I can help you, right?
I nak pecah. Minyak pun habis.
First Wives. Stream episod terbaru dahulu, eksklusif on demand. Dan 9 malam di Astro Citra.
Industri takaful Malaysia diunjurkan mengalami kerugian sehingga 800 juta ringgit dalam peluang perniagaan berikutan had sementara 10% ke atas kenaikan premium insurans perubatan menurut Ketua Pegawai Eksekutif Persatuan Takaful Malaysia MTA Muhammad Razwan Muhammad. Muhammad Razwan berkata angka ketarik itu mewakili unjuran kerugian yang timbul daripada ketidakupayaan untuk mengutip caruman yang lebih tinggi disebabkan kenaikan premium insurans perubatan sementara dan bukannya kerugian keuntungan sebenar. Untuk itu kita mempersilakan tamu yang sudah bersedia dalam talian untuk bantu kita fahami bagaimanakah industri takaful ini dapat berjuang dan survive dalam era ataupun kos yang semakin melonjak ini. Kita mempersilakan Profesor Dr. Syed Muhammad Al-Junid Syed Junid, Profesor Ekonomi Polisi dan Pengurusan Kesihatan, Pakar Perubatan Kesihatan Awam School of Medicine IMU University. Saya nak ucapkan terima kasih Prof kerana sudi meluangkan masa bersama kami. Tentu dalam segmen kali ini kita nak melihat segala perkara apabila bercakap mengenai tarif ataupun kita lihat perang tarif yang sedang berlaku di peringkat global. Ia sudah tentu memberi impak yang sangat besar kepada negara lain, terutamanya negara kecil dan terbuka seperti Malaysia ini sendiri. Dan kali ini kita nak beri tumpuan khusus kepada keseluruhan ekosistem industri kesihatan. Jadi bagaimana had sementara 10% kenaikan insurans premium insurans ini perubatan akan mempengaruhi model perniagaan pengendali takaful, terutamanya yang mempunyai portfolio perubatan yang sangat besar ini, Prof?
Ya, terima kasih Saudari Nina kerana menjemput saya untuk memberikan sedikit pendapat berkaitan dengan isu insurans swasta dan juga takaful ini. Kalau kita lihat angka yang disebut oleh pihak industri takaful ini, kerugian yang dikatakan hampir 800 juta itu, ini merupakan salah satu daripada angka yang dipetik berdasarkan kepada kaedah insurans beroperasi sekarang. Sebenarnya keuntungan besar yang diperolehi oleh insurans swasta termasuk juga takaful adalah disebabkan cara mereka beroperasi di negara kita ini berbeza sedikit daripada best practices ataupun praktis yang terbaik yang dilakukan di negara-negara seperti Eropah dan sebagainya. Mungkin 800 juta keuntungan itu disebabkan oleh mereka menggunakan kaedah apa yang kita sebut sebagai kaedah rating berisiko ataupun risk rating. Dalam kaedah risk rating ini, biasanya premium itu akan dikira berdasarkan kepada pertama umur, yang kedua berdasarkan kepada keadaan kesihatan pesakit ataupun mereka yang membeli polisi tersebut. Yang ketiga adalah experience atau pengalaman mereka yang pernah melakukan klaim atau tuntutan sebelumnya. Risk rating ini sebenarnya merupakan suatu yang merugikan ahli masyarakat dan bukan merupakan praktis yang baik. Kalau kita lihat di negara-negara Eropah, risk rating ini tidak dibenarkan dan mereka di semua insurans yang beroperasi di Eropah dikehendaki melakukan apa yang kita sebut sebagai community rating. Kalau community rating ini apabila mereka mengira premium akan jauh lebih tinggi. Sebab itu kalau kita lihat di Eropah, peningkatan premium setiap tahun tidak lebih daripada 3%. Negara yang terbesar yang menggunakan insurans swasta seperti negara Netherlands dan juga Germany, maksimum yang berlaku di sana cuma 3%, tapi kita nak meningkatkan lebih daripada 40 ke 70%. Dan saya rasa langkah yang diambil oleh bank negara untuk menghadkan peningkatan pada 10% dalam tempoh mungkin 3 tahun atau 2 tahun di sekarang ni masih lagi tidak memadai, kerana ia akan masih lagi akan menyebabkan kos rawatan dan juga kos perkhidmatan kesihatan di negara kita ini akan terus meningkat. Jadi saya rasa insurans swasta dan juga takaful harus mengubah cara mereka beroperasi dan kerajaan juga harus memastikan bahawa insurans takaful dan juga insurans swasta ini melakukan atau beroperasi menggunakan best practices. Jadi tidak boleh lagi kita membenarkan insurans swasta ini menggunakan kaedah risk rating ini untuk mengira premium mereka. Dan mereka harus menggunakan inovasi yang lebih baik untuk memastikan bahawa kos rawatan keseluruhan tidak meningkat. Harus kita ingat bahawa di negara Amerika, salah satu penyebab mengapa pembelanjaan kesihatannya begitu tinggi sehingga 18% daripada KDNK. Salah satunya adalah disebabkan oleh penggunaan insurans swasta apabila seseorang itu berumur 60 di bawah 65 tahun di Amerika. Jadi ini menyebabkan kebanyakan penduduk Amerika itu terpaksa membayar kos yang tinggi disebabkan oleh mereka melakukan pembiayaan kesihatan menggunakan insurans swasta. Di Malaysia dengan penduduk 35 juta kita dipahamkan hampir 22% daripada penduduk kita mempunyai insurans swasta. Ini kajian tahun 2019. Tapi sekarang mungkin sudah meningkat sehingga 26% mungkin ya. Dan biasanya insurans swasta ini dan juga takaful biasanya mereka mendapat keuntungan dengan 3 cara. Satu, pertama sekali adalah dikatakan 3D ya. Pertama, delay, melambatkan pembayaran. Yang kedua, deny, iaitu dikatakan apabila tuntutan dilakukan mereka menolak tuntutan tersebut. Dan ketiga, defend. Ini apabila berlaku ketidakpuasan hati, mereka akan pergi bawa kepada mahkamah dan mereka mempunyai sumber keuangan yang kuat. Dia biasanya pengguna akan tidak sukar untuk memenangi kes-kes tersebut di mahkamah. Jadi ini kita harapkan tidak berlaku di negara kita, tetapi ini adalah kaedah di mana insurans takaful ini biasanya beroperasi. Jadi penting kita pastikan bahawa kaedah yang best practices yang baik dalam insurans swasta ini dilakukan di negara kita, dan ini kerajaan harus mengambil langkah yang proaktif untuk memastikan rakyat kita tidak menghadapi masalah disebabkan oleh operasi daripada insurans swasta dan takaful ini.
Sudah tentu Prof, 800 juta ringgit itu hampir mencecah 1 bilion ringgit. Bukan angka yang kecil kalau kita lihat kepada kerugian itu. Sudah tentu apabila kerugian terus membawa impak yang besar juga. Dan ini adalah antara langkah-langkah yang telah dikongsikan oleh Prof untuk pastikan bagaimana pengendali takaful ini dapat memastikan kelasaran ataupun kemampanan perniagaan mereka sambil mematuhi had tersebut. Prof, dengan inflasi kos perubatan Malaysia mencapai 15% pada tahun 2024, bagaimana pengendali takaful boleh meimbangi keperluan untuk menguruskan kos yang meningkat dengan had peraturan terhadap kenaikan premium? Dan kita nampak ini bukan senang untuk mereka balance. Tapi bagaimana, Prof?
Ya, jadi sebenarnya secara lebih khusus, lebih menyeluruh, kita tidak boleh mengharapkan insurans swasta sebagai merupakan suatu sumber untuk pembiayaan kesihatan. Ianya seharusnya cuma sebagai suatu sumber tambahan. Kita harus ada sumber yang lain untuk menjadi sumber pembiayaan. Kalau kita lihat di sini di negara kita kalau lihat di sumbangan perkhidmatan kesihatan dari segi kewangannya adalah hampir 45% daripada KDNK. Dan insurans swasta ini cuma memberikan kontribusi cuma sekitar 7% daripada total health expenditure di Malaysia, 7 hingga 8%. Malahan lebih banyak kita keluarkan daripada bayaran sendiri ataupun out of pocket payment. Jadi kita harus asingkan kaedah pengendalian insurans swasta ini dengan pengendalian bisnes yang lain di negara kita, kerana kesihatannya agak suatu yang unik dan kita harus memberikan suatu perkhidmatan yang baik supaya kita boleh maintain apa yang kita sebut sebagai universal health coverage, iaitu setiap ahli masyarakat mempunyai peluang untuk mengakses perkhidmatan kesihatan tanpa mengalami masalah keuangan ataupun financial risk. Dan sekarang ini saya tidak nampak insurans swasta ini merupakan suatu daripada dapat memberikan sumbangan ke arah itu. Jadi kalau sekiranya mereka beroperasi cuma mengambil keuntungan, ini akan menimbulkan masalah dalam menyediakan suatu bentuk pembiayaan kepada masyarakat kita. Terutama sekali apabila masyarakat kita, penduduk kita menghadapi masalah penyakit tidak berjangkit, non-communicable diseases. Hampir 2/3 penduduk kita mempunyai salah satu daripada penyakit non-communicable disease dan kos rawatannya cukup tinggi sekali. Jadi insurans swasta harus melakukan beberapa inovasi. Salah satunya adalah mereka harus memberikan insentif supaya pemegang-pemegang polisi ini diberikan insentif apabila mereka mengambil langkah-langkah untuk pencegahan. Misalnya mereka yang berhenti merokok, mereka yang melakukan riadah ataupun aktiviti fizikal secara regular dan juga menurunkan berat badan. Jadi apabila mereka melakukan ini, mungkin premium tadi boleh diturunkan. Ini akan memberikan insentif kepada pengguna. Okay. Insentif kepada pembekal ataupun pemberi perkhidmatan juga harus mereka berikan. Misalnya Mereka harus memberikan insentif kepada hospital-hospital yang mana memberikan hasil yang baik apabila mereka merawat pesakit. Misalnya, kita harus mengukur kadar komplikasi disebabkan oleh kencing manis, penyakit jantung dan juga penyakit darah tinggi misalnya. Kalau outcome yang baik, misalnya kadar komplikasi yang dihadapi oleh pesakit untuk kencing manis, misalnya kadar kegagalan ginjal adalah rendah, maka rumah sakit atau hospital tadi boleh diberikan insentif sebagai dalam pembayaran yang disediakan oleh insurans swasta ataupun insurans takaful ni. Ini contoh-contoh yang lain. Selain itu, strategic purchasing ataupun cara membeli perkhidmatan kesihatan yang disediakan oleh hospital. Kita dikatakan bahawa tidak lama lagi kita akan menggunakan kaedah package seperti DRG. Ini merupakan contoh strategic purchasing yang boleh digunakan oleh insurans swasta untuk memberikan insentif kepada hospital supaya menyediakan perkhidmatan yang efisien dan juga pada kos yang terkawal. Ini ada antara insentif-insentif yang boleh diberikan dimainkan oleh industri swasta, insurans swasta seperti takaful di negara kita.
Baik, sebelum itu saya nak ucapkan terima kasih kepada Prof kerana bantu kami lihat bukan kepada industri insurans dan takaful itu sahaja, tapi perbincangan ini untuk kita untuk melihat konteks yang lebih luas untuk sektor kesihatan di Malaysia, di mana penting untuk kita tangani antara punca utama kenaikan kos perubatan dan memberi sokongan yang padu kepada kelestarian produk insurans perubatan termasuk juga dengan takaful. Sekali lagi saya nak ucapkan terima kasih kepada Profesor Datuk Dr. Syed Muhammad Al-Junid. Syed Junid merupakan pakar ekonomi polisi dan pengurusan kesihatan, pakar perubatan kesihatan awam, School of Medicine IMU University, dan setiap perbincangan ini akan kami rangkumkan dalam astrawani.com dan di semua platform digital Astro Awani. Baik, seterusnya perkembangan analisis mengikut rantau oleh Pertubuhan Perdagangan Dunia WTO menunjukkan bahawa tarif baharu akan memberi kesan paling besar kepada Amerika Syarikat dan Kanada selain penyusutan jumlah dagangan pertumbuhan keluaran dalam negara kasar KDNK turut dijangka terjejas.
Dalam laporan yang diterbitkan di Geneva pada Rabu, WTO mengunjurkan pertumbuhan KDNK rantau Amerika Utara hanya sebanyak 0.4% tahun ini, jauh merosot daripada anggaran awal sebanyak 2%. Menurut WTO, ekspor dari Amerika Utara pula dijangka menyusut sebanyak 12.6% pada 2025, manakala import pula menurun sebanyak 9.6%. Sebelum pengumuman tarif oleh Presiden Donald Trump, WTO menjangkakan ekspor rantau itu meningkat 2.2% dan import naik 2.8%. Ekspor China ke Amerika Syarikat pula dikini dijangka merosot sebanyak 77% di bawah senario semasa. Bagaimanapun, kesan terhadap Eropah dilaporkan jauh lebih ringan. WTO mengunjurkan ekspor Eropah meningkat 1% tahun ini berbanding 1.4% sebelum ini, manakala import dijangka naik 1.9% berbanding 2.1% sebelumnya. Pertumbuhan KDNK Eropah kini diunjurkan pada 1.2%, menurun daripada 1.4%. Analisis WTO ini berdasarkan situasi semasa setakat 14 April. Sejak kembali ke White House, Trump telah mengumumkan pelbagai tarif baharu ke atas beberapa negara dan sektor, walaupun sebahagiannya telah digantung dengan China kekal sebagai sasaran utama. Jika senario semasa berterusan, WTO menjangka jumlah dagangan global akan menyusut sebanyak 0.2% berbanding unjuran pertumbuhan 2.7% sebelum ini.
Alright, for this segment, we're going to be focusing on Donald Trump that has said that he looked at the visit of Xi Jinping to 3 Southeast Asian countries a way to screw the US. While Malaysia keep pushing open economy agenda between two big brothers, it also puts Malaysia in a tight spot to negotiate with the stubborn US. And for this episode, and this time we're going to welcome you our guest, Dr. Trisha Yeo, Associate Professor of Practice at the School of Politics and International Relations, University of Nottingham, Malaysia. I want to say thank you very much, Dr. Trisha, for joining me. Definitely, this is a very hot topic from last week, actually, with the announcement of the reciprocal tariff. Firstly, how do you assess the strategic timing of Xi Jinping's visit to Malaysia, Cambodia and Vietnam in the context of the recent US reciprocal tariffs on the Southeast Asian countries?
Thank you so much, Nina, for having me. First of all, I do think the visit by President Xi Jinping to Malaysia was actually planned before Trump's announcement of the reciprocal tariffs. However, we know that this US-China trade war has been going on for a long time. It's not just from the 2nd of April. Of course, that accelerated it. So the strategic timing of President Xi's visit, of course, is timed very well because Malaysia is the chair of ASEAN, and China, given the position it's in, would like to re-establish or enhance ties with all Southeast Asian countries across ASEAN, and particularly Malaysia. He has also been to visit Cambodia and Vietnam, of course, that were hit by really high tariffs, 49 and 46% respectively. Malaysia got 24%. So what you see from the visit yesterday and today will probably be a slew of different announcements. But above the announcements, essentially, is to foster closer, stronger bilateral ties. And President Xi has already talked about another golden 50-year relationship between Malaysia and China.
And to what extent do you believe that we can see from the situation Xi's Sham offensive will succeed in strengthening China's economic and political influence in Southeast Asia, especially given Malaysia's ASEAN chairmanship this year?
It will strengthen ties, but I think we need to also be a little bit circumspect about what the reality of these strengthening of economic ties look like. I think there is a number of memorandum of understandings, MOUs, that are being signed. The MOUs themselves are more educational, cultural. There's some MOUs around digital transformation, for example. What this results in actual concrete economic terms remains to be seen. Of course, there's existing or pre-existing BRI or Belt and Road Initiative related projects like the ECRL that are still in the works and will still need to be fully constructed to see what the impact and economic effects will be. And at the same time, of course, not forgetting that while we develop these deeper ties with China, and that's already been happening over the last year, Malaysia still has a very important trading partner in the form of the US, right? So I think this is the whole point of the predicament that Malaysia is actually put in, because it has already sent diplomats and negotiators over to Washington, D.C. to try and get a deal with Donald Trump. And that's actually what Donald Trump wants, right? To have the nations of the world coming before him and bowing at his feet, so to speak, to figure out a deal. But the point is, are we going to be able to be strategic and intelligent enough to navigate the waters between these two major superpowers of the world in a way that will benefit us and also benefit the region as a whole? So that's going to be difficult to navigate.
It's definitely not an easy task for us, especially considering we're an open and small economy. And talking about the Southeast Asia, how can they balance their historical preference for the US against the growing economic pressures and incentive to align more closely with China amid tariff tensions?
Well, I think the mere fact that Malaysia and Southeast Asia lie within the vicinity of China itself in terms of geography, that itself tells you that where the affiliation would be naturally, historically. We also share a lot of these more cultural nuances that perhaps we have up to now not fully been able to align with the so-called Western appeal. Having said that, I think Asian values can also sometimes be a guise for countries to eschew democratic norms and values, which are also very important, right, to uphold, especially in countries like Malaysia, where we don't have like a military dictator. We still want to uphold those values. So those ties will be there. I think if you talk about the economic value of these relationships, without a doubt, we will be making decisions that are best suited for our interests. For example, being able to strengthen the supply chains within the region, strengthen supply chains between ASEAN and China, and also not forgetting other countries, right, like India, which also stands to gain as a result of this US-China trade war. The last thing I'll mention right now is just that there's also a security aspect to this. We haven't said very much about what's happening in the South China Sea, and I don't think that will be discussed at this particular visit, since trade and economy are weighing high on the priority list. I'm not sure how Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim will also feel, whether he's comfortable about broaching the subject of territorial sea disputes in the South China Sea, different, right, from the position that is being taken by the Philippines. However, I do think that moving forward, if China really does want to increase and enhance its relationship with Malaysia and with the region, there are certain things that we also want to put forward on the table. One of them is a security issue. The other one, of course, is how do we expect or ask for possibly greater governance standards. One big, hot potato issue would be state-owned enterprises and how China is going to look at their SOEs in the same way that, Malaysia should also be pressured into looking into our own SOEs, or what we prefer to call GLCs, the government-linked companies in our own country.
And also the war between the big brothers, many have expected to continue until the end of year 2025. So I'm going to take a look at the potential long-term consequences, especially for ASEAN economies, integration and regional supply chains. If countries start imposing trade barriers on Chinese goods as a defensive measure.
Yeah, that's going to be the trick. So I think in an article that I wrote recently, I said that ASEAN countries need to really resist imposing any form of retaliatory trade barriers, firstly on each other, because suddenly you're going to see an overabundance and oversupply of cheap goods coming from China into our markets, and also perhaps possibly from other countries within the region, right? So like Vietnam as well will be looking for new markets. And of course, Malaysia will be looking for new markets. And these three countries also are producing fairly similar items when it comes to electronic goods, E&E, right? Semiconductors and so on. So it's really important that we actually try to do some more collective negotiation and collective discussion in concrete terms, not just on, speaking in sort of very motherhood grand narrative statements. And the importance of these collective agreements would be that we commit to not necessarily harming each other's economies, right? So I know it's very difficult for countries because at the end of the day, countries are thinking about their own sovereignty, they're thinking about their own strategic interests. But this will really be a test of the ASEAN centrality and the so-called, economic inclusion and integration within the region. Are we able to strengthen the entire region as a whole, as opposed to just thinking about our own strategic interests in a very, Machiavellian manner? And of course, this includes China as well, right? So ASEAN plus other nations in the neighborhood, what would be in the best strategic and economic interest of us as a collective whole? But I say that, but I'm not in a position of being a negotiator, so I don't envy those who are trying to think about these economic and trade solutions. I am sure that they are very difficult. It really is a policy dilemma for anyone who's in a policy-making position at the moment. So we wish our policymakers all the best, and I'm also happy to contribute ideas if ever there's an opportunity.
All right, thank you very much for this very insightful discussion as said by our Prime Minister Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim at the official dinner in honour of His Excellency Xi Jinping, President of the People's Republic of China, as he said on his last word. May the friendship between Malaysia and China endure deep as the sea, steady as the stars and bright with the promise of tomorrow. Again, I'll say thank you very much to our guest, Dr. Trisha Yeo, and definitely all of our discussion here will be featured in AstroAwani.com across all social media platforms. And please stay with us as we will bring more updates on the World Economic Forum on the top stories of the week after this.
Inilah acara kemuncak yang dinanti-nantikan. Pertembungan epik JDT Sri Pahang. Perlawanan akhir Piala Malaysia demi sebuah takhta legenda.
Sri Pahang mendapati Johor Darul Taksim berada di hadapan.
Sokonglah sepenuhnya demi Liga kita. Perlawanan akhir Piala Malaysia secara langsung di Astro dan Astro Go. Ayo gemuruhkan serangan sang juara.
Hani tak disukai sangat.
I baru je balik daripada jumpa suami I.
Okey, tak tanya pun.
Siapa yang tak nak Hani ada dalam ahli jawatan kuasa surau kita?
Saya ni bongok juga.
Kalau awak ni bongok, saya tak ada dah suka kat awak.
Hah?
Hani minta maaf. Ahad 9 malam, meriah lain macam di Astro Ria dan Astro Go.
When I was introduced to ballet, I was an extremely introverted and shy young girl. Yeah, I think that it was already a part of who I am, my personality, but it was also my experiences as a young person. You know, having so much instability, constantly moving. I mean, I think I had 4 stepfathers, and I shut down, and I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to be seen. Was a teacher who invested in me, who saw potential in me, gave me opportunity and gave me access, and kept saying, no, come back. I see potential in you. Like, this is something that you can take bigger than you could ever imagine. She said I was going to be dining with presidents and kings and queens and dancing on the world stages. And I just thought, you know, I'm living in a motel at this moment with my single mom and 5 siblings. Like, there's no way this is possible. But, you know, it was really about preparing me to become an amazing human being who is going to thrive in society, in different communities. And it was through ballet that I could get to that place. I got so much criticism and negative feedback on this trajectory, you know, being the only Black woman at American Ballet Theatre for over 10 years and coming up against so much adversity, and just remembering I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, what I love to do, and not to let other people's words come in and affect that. By being a part of something that teaches you resilience and discipline and grace and humility when you're having to put yourself out there and be vulnerable, collaboration and community, having to follow, also having to lead, having to be a part of a team, also then being an individual and maybe dancing by yourself sometimes. These, I think, are all important leadership skills.
All of a sudden, it's as though someone turns on a light switch and the levels of anxiety and depression skyrocket, especially in girls. And so I'm trying to figure out what changed. By 2015, they've traded in their flip phones for smartphones with a front-facing camera, high-speed internet, and super addictive, super viral social media on the phone, which wasn't possible in 2010. Imagine if when we went to school, they said, you can bring in your television set, your VCR, your guitar, your paint by numbers, Play-Doh, whatever you want. Bring it in, play with it during class. I mean, that's completely insane. And of course, you wouldn't be able to learn anything. And that's what's happened since 2012. No smartphone before age 14, or high school in the United States, but age 14. No social media until age 16. Social media is wildly inappropriate for children. Talking with strangers, getting addicted. When schools do this, what they all say is that we hear laughter in the hallways again. They say the lunchroom is loud again. Because for the last 10 years, it's been mostly kids just staring down. And this is a big reason why they are so lonely. The more you connect a generation by digital technology, the lonelier they are. The fourth norm is far more free play and independence in the real world. If we're going to take them off of the screens for 10 to 15 hours a day, we've got to give them back fun, excitement, adventure, play, real life.
There's a lot of ways in which space technology fundamentally supports our quality of life on Earth, and that comes from kind of an ambition to go and explore the stars. There is I think, a lack of appreciation for how fundamentally our life is enabled by space. Your smartphone works the way it works because it has a GPS-enabled chip that connects to a system of satellites that are orbiting the Earth. If you get satellite TV, that is coming from a satellite that is 36,000 kilometers away out in space, that is beaming that transmission to your dish. If we were not investing in the original return to the moon, we would not have had the semiconductor revolution that we have enjoyed. Even though the semiconductors were invented outside of NASA, in the early 60s, NASA rockets and other rockets were 75% of all global demand for semiconductors. That allowed the whole industry to scale at a much more rapid pace. The vast majority of economic growth in the 20th century came from advances in technology, came from productivity improvements. So space is one of the ways in which governments around the world seek that productivity improvement and channel it through mission-focused investments like going to space.
I wanted to become an aerospace engineer. Went to college early at 14, ultimately got my degree at Berkeley. But it was at 16 that I pivoted my career from aerospace into the longevity and healthcare ecosystem, because my aunt, who was a really integral part of our first generation immigrant family, she was diagnosed with terminal stage colon cancer. And what came with that was 2.5 years of navigating her daily long-term care needs. Things like getting in and out of bed, taking a shower, using the bathroom. And for us, it wiped us out financially. We didn't realize health insurance wouldn't cover majority of this care. We stepped in physically since it was happening at the home. It made me incredibly empathetic to how devastating it is to navigate a long-term care event, and the fact that it's going to happen to every single household at least once. This is an important economic shift where more people than ever are aging longer and not necessarily healthier, and the volume of folks that are entering into our retirement population is also at an unprecedented number, in addition to the rising healthcare inflation of long-term care costs. The long-term care nightmare that's coming is inevitable.
Welcome to Meet the Leader. I'm Linda Lucina, and I am excited to introduce you to Lily Vitaya-Ruxkal. She is the founder of Water Lily, and that is a startup that's helping us get more prepared for living longer and helping us afford it. How are you, Lily?
I'm doing great.
Very good. Can you explain the concept of the longevity economy for people who aren't familiar?
So the longevity economy represents this massive economic force that's coming from all the aging individuals entering into our retired population and needing some form of care or help. This either results in assistance with healthcare needs, financial needs, or navigating the family caregiving aspect of it as well.
Sure. And why is it crucial that we bridge this gap globally given that there's increasing lifespans and decreasing health spans?
This is an important economic shift where more people than ever are aging longer and not necessarily healthier, and the volume of folks that are entering into our retirement population is also at an unprecedented number, in addition to the rising healthcare inflation of long-term care costs.
Some call this sort of a long-term care nightmare. Can you give us, what is the worst case scenario here? What is it that we want to avoid when it comes to not being prepared for long-term care?
It's more of the long-term care nightmare that's coming is inevitable, given the dynamics in behavior, finances, and the healthcare dynamics. On average, every single household is going to deal with a very serious form of a long-term care event, and we naturally today avoid the conversation until the point of our aging parents or our grandparents need that care, and we're thrusted into that position of being a caregiver, taking care of our loved ones at the home, or gearing towards the incredibly expensive cost of facility care because we can no longer take care of them at home. We're at unprecedented numbers numbers today where long-term care costs represent 1.5% of GDP. And by 2050, just 25 years from now, what we're going to see is a 400% increase in cost as well. That is mostly taken on by the government, but because of how quickly that cost is growing, which represents a compound annual growth rate of about 6.6%, that burden will likely fall away from the government's social safety net and likely fall on the families in the form of either additional regulations, taxes, or out-of-pocket costs.
And what or who can help promote financial literacy for people for all generations and all backgrounds? Who can help?
I would say all the voices right now that already talk about the importance of saving towards retirement, whether it's your 401k or additional retirement accounts. Those voices, whether it's the employer, it's the public figure, any public figures in media that talk about financial planning, the wealth management industry, the insurance industry, they all need to start talking about how important it is to prepare for long-term care costs, because it's not just about growing our wealth so that we feel comfortable in retirement. It's about protecting that wealth as well, because aging costs are one of the number one reasons why we deplete a lot of our savings.
Long-term care, you talked a little bit about, hey, it's not just something for older adults to concern themselves, but can you dig in a little bit about that? You know, who else needs to be thinking about long-term care?
So the folks that need to really start thinking about long-term care are not just the families that have never thought about this topic, and now we see that the burden will be shifting towards them, and how do we prepare them appropriately and educate them. The responsibility really falls on both the private and public sector to educate these families on the future burden of long-term care costs, and have a dialogue not only with these families but amongst themselves to talk about what are some potential solutions that we haven't seen before that need to be in place to really prepare these families, both from a social safety net perspective as well as the private financial products that are a lot smarter than just not saving for this environment, or that are more competitive than saving for this environment, whether it's the insurance industries, the financial services industries, or the local or federal governments.
So tell us about Water Lily. What is it and how does it work?
So Water Lily is a company that I founded that built AI that predicts a family's future aging care needs and the associated cost. And we guide them through the logistical and financial planning process to steer them to a more sustainable aging trajectory. And the way that works is through an initial 3-minute simple intake form where we don't need your genetic information, we don't need your medical records. We ask about 3 minutes worth of questions on social demographic information, medical information, and financial information. And with that, we leverage over 500 million data points of families that already navigated a long-term care event where we followed them for 30 years so that we can match you to the households that went through this event to predict for you what is your likelihood of needing care, what age you'll start needing that, as well as that duration of time and that progression of care needs, where you usually start with needing care at the home for your lighter care needs. And it's not nursing home all throughout. Towards the tail end, you do touch on nursing home care. But what's important in it is we double down and also tell you if you're going to need care at the home, we also predict how much the family members would step in by default if you don't have a plan in place, whether it's a spouse, the children, or other family members, so that you might decide, I don't want to burden my family in that same way, and maybe I need to save more in order to pass those care hours off to the professional. And the end piece of Water Lily is how do we solve for that future, let's say 1.5 million in cost, as efficiently as possible, either through self-funding, through investments, or through insurance products or other financial products that could also cover this cost.
And how do the clients actually work with the tool? What information are they giving you? What do they need to have to feed into this tool?
So we ask for social demographic information, such as your gender, where you live, or your marital status. We ask for financial information, which is your net worth, as well as your annual income. And we ask medical questions, such as any diagnoses that we should know about, any recent surgeries, are you taking any medication as well?
And what sort of before and after stories do you have so far that you might be able to share with us?
So the first story is actually one of my co-founder, Evan. He is one of our first angel investors turned co-founder. And so when he invested in the company, he just believed in my background. I've been patenting and innovating from a very young age, from 12 to 16, working with NASA and then leading product and engineering. So he knew that I was going to build something great for families that really needed it from a healthcare perspective. But when we launched our first MVP about 1.5 years ago, he tried out the product. There was even no recommendations on the platform, no financial recommendations, but he didn't know anything about long-term care. And when he went through the system, it told him what his unique needs were going to look like. He was going to need care sooner than he expected. He was going to pass sooner than he expected. And it was going to be way more expensive than he ever anticipated. And he couldn't stop thinking about those statistics. And so what he did is that he changed the way he was saving towards this event, as well as he's lost 10 to 15 pounds actually since he's used our software in order to stave off the long-term care events and also live longer, because that's what the projection showed him if he was healthier in some way. And we've seen countless stories like these with the hundreds of families that already walked through our system since we launched just a few months ago, where the main statistic is not just it's not just about building a beautiful educational experience. It's about getting families to act. And so we see that of the hundreds of families that self-report after building out a water lily plan, 45% actually purchase a life, long-term care, or an annuity product, which represents a 100x increase or an 11,000% increase in long-term care financial product sales compared to the baseline today, which more closely matches the growth in long-term care needs that we're also going to have in aging population, as well as over almost a third update their investment strategies towards long-term care, a fifth changed their estate plan, and almost 2/3 changed how they want their family members to step in as a result. And what is not on our platform, but what is actually happening, which represents unique use cases of our platform, is many clients are also losing weight through our platform, where they are oftentimes they're very overweight. And when they see that their long-term care needs are in their 70s when they expect it to be in their 90s, they think, well, is it because I'm overweight? And so they re-put in their data that is 40 pounds lighter than their current version, and they notice it helps them live 5 years longer, or it makes their long-term care event a lot less intense, a lot less expensive, and in 5 or 6 months, they've lost those 40 pounds. So that's been really incredible results for our platform as well.
Absolutely. And also when we're factoring the costs of living longer, you have to maybe factor in that you might be ill. You might not be at your same health.
Exactly.
There was a special pilot with Prudential. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Prudential saw a really innovative use case for Water Lily where we can better engage their policyholder population, whether they're on claim and needing care right now and have activated their policy, or if they're pre-claim, meaning they've purchased a policy, but they've yet to have that long-term care event just yet. So Prudential has encouraged that entire policyholder population to use Water Lily to help them for the first time ever actually understand what their future care needs and costs are going to look like, to not only understand, is there a financial gap in this policy and how much care I actually need and what that'll cost, and maybe I need to self-fund for that. But also, how do I start thinking about my future care needs in a much more logistical and sustainable manner, whether it's how I want my family members to step in, how do I have a conversation with them about whether or not they could actually step in to take care of me? Do I want to age at the home? Am I okay with like aging into the facility? So we're starting to ignite those conversations so that we could more appropriately understand the risk of this population, as well as guide them to a more sustainable future, not only for themselves, but really for the private life insurance industry that's trying to take on this risk as well.
You have a sort of an incredible origin story for Lily. Can you tell us a little bit about this story?
Yes. So I founded Water Lily due to navigating a personal long-term care event in our family in a past life. You're correct. I wanted to become an aerospace engineer. So when I was 12 to 16, I was doing some work with NASA, went to college early at 14, ultimately got my degree at Berkeley. But it was at 16 that I pivoted my career from aerospace into the longevity and healthcare ecosystem, because my aunt, who's a really integral part of our first generation immigrant family, she was diagnosed with terminal stage colon cancer. And what came with that was 2.5 years of navigating her daily long-term care needs, because she was just so incredibly frail post-chemotherapy. Things like getting in and out of bed, taking a shower, using the bathroom, needs that many people are likely familiar with when thinking about their aging parents or thinking about their grandparents and the needs that they have. And for us, it wiped us out financially. We didn't realize health insurance wouldn't cover majority of this care. We stepped in physically for majority of that care since it was happening at the home. But most importantly, it tore my family apart to navigate this without a plan. We're first-generation immigrants, and this is on my mom's side, where her entire family and extended family came from Cambodia and are war refugees. And so they were incredibly tight-knit when they came here to the country. But after navigating this long-term care event for my aunt, where there was no plan in place, there was no insight into what the best form of care for her would look like, it really tore my family apart, created deep strife, such that we haven't spoken to that entire side of our extended family in over a decade since this event has happened. So it made me incredibly empathetic to how devastating it is to navigate a long-term care event, and the fact that it's going to happen to every single household at least once. The core thesis around Water Lily then was, how can we take that really deep scar tissue that I developed navigating this personally, and for every single other household that is going through this today or will be going through this, how can we reduce that scar tissue that happens on this event or get rid of it altogether by showcasing through predictive AI what that scar tissue will look like to young enough family members that could actually make a decision ahead of time and change their trajectory.
And what are 2 to 3 practical ways that people can better prepare for long-term family care needs?
The first one is understanding that families usually take on majority of the care needs as well as the majority of the care cost. So becoming educated on what it means to potentially take care of mom or dad or your grandparents, whether they want to age at home or they're open to going into facility-based care, whether it's a nursing home, starting to become educated on what those care resources look like, either to get professionals at the home or get that in a facility, as well as potentially taking on that care yourself, whether if your parents or your grandparents need help with getting in out of bed, taking a shower, using the bathroom, etc. How are you stepping in for that logistically? Can you step in for that? Do you live close enough, or are you planning to live close enough to start to take care of them and start to talk to your parents about, or your grandparents or those family members about financially where they're at? Majority of people today are not prepared at all, even for retirement. So as a result, they're not even prepared for these costs. And oftentimes, these loved ones want to stay at home. They have a certain quality of life that they expect when they age. And as a result, the cost of maintaining that quality of life oftentimes falls on their children or other younger family members. So understanding, do we have to start taking on that cost ourselves? What is that cost going to look like? Is it $250,000? Is it $500,000? How can we financially start to prepare for those costs ahead of time? And then finally, the third piece is start to look into financial products in this space as well. It's not just about saving towards this event $5 every single month. That's just not enough money. However, there is an entire overlooked private industry, both life insurance and the long-term care insurance industry, who do have financial insurance products or annuities that can have potentially a better ROI than you self-funding yourself.
Thanks so much, Lily. For more video podcasts, go to our YouTube page. And for more transcripts, go to wef.ch/podcasts.
Di dalam setiap berita yang dibawa, konteks amat penting. Kami sentiasa membawakan yang tergempar dan terkini. Pastikan Astro AWANI menjadi pilihan anda, tidak kira di mana sahaja anda